Today, we're looking at a completely fascinating, fierce, and, frankly, entirely unauthorized race to bring Xbox Game Pass natively to Linux and the Steam Deck. It's this incredible story about grassroots reverse engineering, insane community dedication, and a giant corporate hurdle that was never really meant to be jumped.
To really get why this is such a monumental development, we've got to start with the stark reality for Linux gamers right now. Say you own a Steam Deck, or maybe you've fully committed to a Linux desktop, right? And you want to play your Game Pass library. Well, you basically have exactly one legal option: Xbox Cloud Gaming, which means you're forced into paying for the most expensive Ultimate tier just to stream every single game over the internet instead of, actually running it locally on your own hardware. And with streaming, you're always going to have to accept that inevitable input lag. Could be 20 milliseconds, could be 200. But for a lot of serious players, that simply isn't a viable workaround. It's literally a deal breaker dressed up as a solution.
Section 1. The Linux Deal Breaker.
So the friction here is just absolutely undeniable. On one side, you have Microsoft. They've spent years building Game Pass into arguably their single most important gaming product. But that entire infrastructure is designed top to bottom for Windows. That gives Windows users native local gameplay at a standard price. But on the flip side, you have this growing, increasingly serious Linux gaming population that Microsoft hasn't officially acknowledged, let alone supported. So those users are stuck on the outside looking in, with cloud streaming only and a severely compromised experience.
Now, looking at the Steam hardware survey, Linux usage cooled off to around 4% by July, after spiking past 5% back in March. And okay, yeah, 4% might sound tiny at first glance, but you have to remember the sheer massive scale of Steam. That tiny percentage, it actually represents millions of active hardcore gamers just waiting for a real solution. And let's be honest, Linux users aren't exactly known for quietly accepting arbitrary software limits. Plus, a huge chunk of that number consists of Steam Deck owners, baked right into the count. So, Game Pass being unavailable natively isn't just some niche complaint anymore. For a really meaningful slice of that vast audience, it's the single most cited reason they haven't gone all in on Linux.
Section 2. Cracking the front door.
Enter Project Xodus. This tiny team quietly did something Microsoft never authorized and honestly never wanted. They cracked the Xbox login system. And I want to be super incredibly clear about this. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was leaked. This is an entirely unauthorized, open-source GitHub project that was purely reverse-engineered right out in the open. In less than a week, Xodus went from this totally unknown repository to literally the most credible attempt we have ever seen at running PC Game Pass natively on Linux.
So, just how far has Xodus actually gotten? Well, they've already successfully conquered Step 1, Xbox account authentication. Check. They've also cracked Step 2, decrypting the MSIX VC package format that these games are wrapped up in. According to the developers, you can already log in, license, and download the games, which leaves only that ominous Step 3 totally unresolved, actually running the games natively on Linux.
Now you might be wondering why this specific attempt won't just quietly fade away like all those other hack Xbox on Linux stories that pop up every couple of years. To understand that, we have to look at this team's incredible pedigree. This isn't just some random group hoping for the best. We're talking about community-driven, volunteer developers with a seriously proven track record. These are the exact same people behind the highly successful Heroic Games launcher. They've spent years successfully bringing the Epic Games Store and GOG over to Linux, and they did it completely without either company's official blessing. Xodus is just that exact same philosophy pointed at a much bigger, much more locked-down target.
Section 3. The Corporate Moving Target.
But here's the catch. Microsoft isn't just sitting still. They're legitimately improving their own infrastructure. Back in April, they previewed a brand new format called MSI XVC2. This is a new Xbox PC game package format designed purely for efficiency. The official pitch is smarter update handling that can shrink patch sizes dramatically, basically by only touching the parts of a game that actually changed. And honestly, it's a genuinely great feature. But whatever the intent was, the effect on an unofficial reverse engineering project like Xodus is pretty severe. It forces them to deal with the messy fallout of this huge back-end shift.
So, the Xodus developers are up against a pretty brutal ticking clock right now. Microsoft previewed the new format in April. Fast forward to August 10th, and Xodus finally cracks the original package format. But looking ahead to October, that brand new format is set to become the absolute standard, and Xodus hasn't cracked this new version yet. Every single time the delivery format changes, an unauthorized implementation basically has to catch up from scratch.
History has not been kind to unofficial projects racing against a giant platform holder who controls the very infrastructure underneath them, because technically, Microsoft doesn't have to let this keep working.
Section 4. What happens next? Honestly, getting the games downloaded and licensed was genuinely the easy half of the battle. Now come the real hurdles. First off, you have to build out compatibility with the Xbox Game Development Kit, which means crossing your fingers and hoping tools like Wine, DXVK, and Proton can carry that incredibly heavy weight. Second, you've got to optimize for hundreds of individual titles, each with their own weird engine quirks and edge cases. Third, and this is arguably the ultimate final boss of Linux gaming, you have to overcome highly competitive anti-cheat systems. Those have historically acted like an impenetrable brick wall for Linux, and they haven't even been addressed in this project yet. And finally, you have that constant looming threat of Microsoft changing their formats all over again. Nobody at Microsoft is helping optimize this. It is a true steep uphill battle.
But even with all those massive hurdles, we really shouldn't lose sight of the incredible victory here. The lock on the front door? It's open. Conquering the identity and delivery systems has taken what used to be a completely theoretical conversation and turned it into a tangible reality. The two hardest conceptual barriers, authentication and decryption, are officially solved. Now, whatever is on the other side of that unlocked door is still being built, sure, but hey, the door is finally open. I want to pose a question directly to you. If Xodus fully succeeds in getting these games running smoothly, and if Microsoft decides to just look the other way and let it live, is Game Pass on Linux actually enough to change your operating system? Is this the single feature that would finally pull you entirely away from Windows? Or was Game Pass never really the thing keeping you there in the first place? It's a genuinely fascinating question for the future of PC gaming.